I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. There is a teaching of Jesus Christ, brief, yet its echo resounds endlessly in our souls, a teaching about unlimited forgiveness. I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Do you hear the warmth, the intimacy in his every word? It is not a mathematical formula, a number for us to count. 70 times 7 is not 490 times, but an endless forgiveness, a heart so open it never closes. Jesus does not ask of us anything beyond our strength. He gently invites us to step into the very depth of God's heart, where mercy flows like a river that never runs dry. When someone hurts us, the wound can cause us to close ourselves off, to erect walls of resentment. But the Lord's teaching is like a stream of cool water, slowly seeping into the driest places of our soul, reminding us that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a phenomenal strength. It is the power to free ourselves from the burden of hatred, allowing our souls to be serene and light. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting the pain, but choosing not to let that pain continue to consume our lives. It is a journey, sometimes not an easy one, but every step on that path of forgiveness brings us closer to true peace. As someone once contemplated, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. Every time we open our hearts to forgive our brothers and sisters, whether for a minor mistake or a deep wound, we are letting the light of God's love shine through our own lives, and in that light, we are not only healing others, but we are also healing our own souls. Let this teaching of the Lord be our guide, so that every day of our lives may be a love song of unlimited forgiveness and love. Continuing the warm emotional current from the Lord's teaching, let us reflect more deeply. If the teaching on forgiving 70 times 7 is a gentle love song, then each note in that song contains a profound philosophy, illuminating the soul and opening the doors to truth, love, and freedom. Below are the philosophies distilled from that endless spring of love. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now we invite you to listen. 1. Forgiveness is not a number, but a state of mind. This is not a problem of limits, but an invitation to change the very root of our hearts. It is about cultivating a garden of the soul, where forgiveness is always the blooming flower, ready to spread its fragrance without counting how many times it has given. It is an attitude towards life, a constant choice of the heart. One afternoon, while sitting by the Sea of Galilee, Peter approached Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus smiled, picked up a handful of sand, and let it run through his fingers. He said, "Peter, can you count these grains of sand, or the waves out there? So is the mercy of my Father in heaven. Therefore, I do not tell you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Do not count, my son. Just love." 2. Forgiveness is releasing yourself from the chains of the past. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Unforgiveness is an invisible prison, confining us with painful memories, preventing us from moving forward into the future with peace. Forgiveness is the key to unlocking that prison door and setting yourself free. At a market in Capernaum, a woman named Salome lamented to Jesus, "Teacher, my neighbor cheated me out of a large sum of money. I can't sleep at night for the anger." Jesus pointed to a porter struggling under a heavy load and said, "Salome, look at that man. Your resentment is like that burden, but you are the only one carrying it. Your neighbor may have forgotten, but you are still carrying the weight of the past." Put it down, my child, so that your soul may be light. 3. Forgiveness is an expression of divine strength, not human weakness. In the eyes of the world, revenge is strength, and forgiveness is weakness. But Jesus taught the opposite truth. It takes far greater strength to extinguish the fire of hatred with the water of mercy. It is a strength that comes not from muscles or power, but from a heart connected to God. When Jesus and his apostles passed through a Samaritan village, the villagers did not welcome them. James and John became angry. "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" Jesus turned and looked at them with a gentle but firm gaze. "You do not know what kind of spirit you belong to. The power of the kingdom of heaven is not to destroy, but to heal. To respond to hatred with love, that is true power." 4. Forgiving others is how we open our hearts to receive God's forgiveness. God's mercy is like an ever-flowing river, but our hearts, hardened by unforgiveness, are like a barren land, preventing that water from seeping in. When we forgive our brothers, we are breaking down that selfish dam so that God's grace of forgiveness can flood our souls. A Pharisee named Nicodemus came to Jesus at night and asked about the kingdom of heaven. During their conversation, Jesus said, "You pray every day, asking the Father in heaven to forgive your debts. But if you still hold on to the debt your brother owes you in your heart, how can you truly feel liberated? Give the forgiveness you desire to receive. That is the law of the kingdom of heaven." 5. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but choosing not to let the pain control the future. Forgiveness is not erasing the memory. The scar may still be there, but it no longer hurts and dictates all our decisions. It is an act of will, a decision that the painful past will not be allowed to determine the happiness of the present and the future. A fisherman named Jonah had a long scar on his arm, accidentally caused by a fellow boatman. He came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, I have said that I forgive him, but every time I look at this scar, I feel angry again." Jesus placed his hand on the scar and said, "Jonah, this scar is a part of your story. It reminds you of a pain, but you have the power to choose what it reminds you of, anger or the overcoming strength of forgiveness. Do not let it be a chain. Let it be a lesson." 6. Forgiveness is a journey, not a single destination. Sometimes forgiveness cannot happen in a moment. With deep wounds, it is a process, a journey of many small steps of effort each day. The important thing is not to give up, to continue walking on that path, however slowly. The Apostle Thomas, ever doubting, confided in Jesus, "Teacher, some wrongs are too great. I try to forgive, but the image keeps coming back to my mind." Jesus replied, "Thomas, when you plant a seed, does it become a tree instantly? It needs time, light, and water every day. Forgiveness is the same. Every time you choose not to nurture anger, you are watering the seed of forgiveness. Be patient, and you will see it grow. 7. Forgiveness is sowing a seed of peace in the world. Every act of unforgiveness, every act of revenge, is a stone thrown into the machinery of violence, keeping it turning endlessly. Conversely, every act of forgiveness, no matter how small, is like a seed of peace sown into the barren ground of the world, capable of spreading and creating a harvest of peace. When the crowd was about to stone the woman caught in adultery, Jesus stopped them with a powerful statement. After everyone had left, he said to the disciples standing nearby, "You see, violence only begets more violence, but one act of mercy can stop a whole cycle of death. When you forgive, you are not just saving one person, you are helping to save the whole world from itself. 8. Forgiveness is seeing the image of God in the person who hurt you. No matter how much someone has erred, they are still created in the image of God. Forgiveness is an act of faith, trying to see through the shell of sin and error, to recognize that divine dignity in our brother, however obscured it may be. A tax collector named Levi, later Matthew, was shunned by all of society. When Jesus came to dine at his house, the others murmured. One person asked Jesus, "Why do you eat with sinners?" Jesus replied, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor. I came here, not to look at the dishonest money he has collected, but to seek the image of my Father that has been tarnished in him. In every person, even the most lost, there is still a spark waiting to be kindled." 9. To refuse to forgive is to place yourself in the position of a judge, a position that belongs only to God. When we insist on not forgiving, we are implicitly declaring that we have the right to judge and condemn others absolutely. We are usurping the role of God. Forgiveness is an act of humility, acknowledging that only God can see into every heart, and only He has the right to make the final judgment. Once the disciples argued about who was the greatest. Jesus called a child and placed him in their midst. He said, "Whoever does not become like this little child will not enter the kingdom of heaven." A child does not hold grudges. He does not give himself the right to judge his brother. You too leave judgment to the Father in heaven. Your part is to love and to forgive. 10. Forgiveness is the highest form of love. If love is to love God and love your neighbor, then forgiveness is when that love is tested and shines most brightly. It is easy to love those who love you, but to love and forgive those who cause you pain, that is the love that imitates the unconditional love of God, who makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. At the Last Supper, after washing the feet of his disciples, including Judas who would betray him, Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." John, resting his head on Jesus' chest, whispered, "Even our enemies, Lord?" Jesus replied gently, "It is in forgiving the one you consider your enemy that your love becomes complete and most like my love." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 11. Forgiveness is a choice of the will, not a feeling of the heart. Feelings are like the weather. They can change erratically. Waiting until you feel like forgiving is like waiting for the sea to be calm to start a journey. You might never set sail. Forgiveness is a decisive act of reason and will, a commitment that I choose not to let this destroy me anymore. And then the feelings will slowly follow that courageous choice. A woman named Martha, the sister of Lazarus, came to Jesus with a sorrowful face. "Teacher, I know I must forgive the person who spoke ill of my family, but my heart is still heavy with resentment. I don't feel forgiving." Jesus took her hand and said, "Martha, do not wait for feelings. Begin with a choice. Right now, tell the Father in heaven that you choose to forgive. Your will is like the rudder of a ship, and your feelings are the waves. Use the rudder to hold your course, and gradually the waves will calm down. 12. Forgiveness begins with bravely acknowledging your own pain. We cannot heal a wound we pretend does not exist. Many people think forgiveness is quickly moving on, downplaying the hurt. But no, the first step of true forgiveness is to look directly at the pain, name it, and allow yourself to grieve. Only when we acknowledge the damage can we begin the process of freeing ourselves from it. On a hill overlooking Jerusalem, a father whose son had been beaten without cause by Roman soldiers sat weeping silently. Jesus came and sat beside him. The father said, "I don't want to appear weak, teacher. I try to forget, but I can't." Jesus replied, "Tears are not weakness, but truth. Your son's wounds are real, and the pain in your heart is also real. Do not run from it. Let your heart ache. For only the one who knows he is wounded seeks a physician." 13. Forgiveness is surrendering your right to your own retaliation. The natural human instinct when hurt is to demand justice, to want the other person to taste similar pain. Forgiveness is an extraordinary act that goes against that instinct. It is the voluntary surrender of the right to judge and retaliate to God, and freeing our hands from the weapons of hatred. The Apostle Andrew, a gentleman, told Jesus about how a merchant had cheated him in a deal for fishing nets. "I just want to go and overturn his stall to vent my anger," Andrew said. Jesus pointed to a field where a farmer was sowing seeds. "Andrew, if that farmer spent all his time picking up weeds to throw back at the barren land next to his, where would he find the time to plant his own field? Leave the judgment of the weeds to the owner of the field. Your part is to continue sowing seeds of goodness." 14. Forgiveness does not erase memory, but it heals and changes its power. Forgiveness does not cause amnesia. The memory of the hurt may still be there, but it is no longer a monster controlling our emotions and behavior. It becomes a healed scar, a reminder of human fragility and the healing power of grace, rather than an open wound that constantly bleeds. Mary Magdalene, in a quiet moment, confided in Jesus about her sinful past. "Teacher, even though I have been forgiven by you, old images sometimes return and make me ashamed." Jesus said, "Mary, look at the moon. Even with its dark spots, it still reflects the light of the sun brilliantly. Your past is the same. Do not try to erase it. Let the light of God's love shine on it. Those memories will no longer be a condemnation, but a song of the mercy that saved you." 15. Forgiving yourself is the most difficult but necessary step to peace. We are often our own harshest judges. We can forgive others, but we relentlessly torment ourselves for past mistakes. Learning to accept our imperfection and receive God's mercy for ourselves is a prerequisite for a truly free soul. A young potter spoiled a precious vase and was deeply dejected. He came to Jesus and said, "I have ruined my finest work. I cannot forgive my own clumsiness." Jesus took the spoiled piece of clay, kneaded it, and began to form a new shape. He said, "You see, even when spoiled, the clay is still valuable in the hands of the potter. So are you in the hands of the Father in heaven. His forgiveness is greater than your mistake. Accept it and allow yourself to begin again." 16. Forgiveness does not mean condoning the wrongful act. Forgiveness is for the person, not the behavior. We can and should condemn injustice, deceit, or violence. But at the same time, we are invited to forgive the person who committed the act. Separating the action from the person is a profound wisdom that helps us keep our hearts soft without becoming indifferent to the truth. When the Pharisees questioned Jesus about his association with tax collectors, he replied, I hate greed, but I love the greedy and call them to repentance. I hate falsehood, but I seek the liar to bring them the truth. The heart of my Father condemns sin, but always opens its arms to the sinner. You see only the act, but I see a soul in need of healing. 17. Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different paths. Forgiveness is a personal, unilateral, and unconditional act. You can forgive someone even if they don't apologize, don't repent, or are even deceased. But reconciliation is a dance for two. It requires repentance, a change from the person who committed the wrong, and the rebuilding of trust. Forgiveness is you opening the door of your heart. Whether they step through it is another matter. A woman who was mistreated by her husband asked Jesus, "I have forgiven him, but how can I trust and live with him as before?" Jesus said, "You have done a great thing by forgiving. That is a gift you have given to your own soul and to God. That part is complete. But rebuilding a home requires bricks and mortar from both sides. Your safety and trust are also precious. Pray and use the wisdom the Father gives you to know when the other person is truly rebuilding their part. 18. True forgiveness can only grow from the soil of truth. Ignoring the truth, pretending that nothing happened, is not forgiveness. It is denial. True forgiveness requires the courage to face the naked truth of what happened. Only then does the act of forgiveness have real weight and healing value, because it is built on the solid foundation of reality. A freed slave came to Jesus. He said, "My former master wants me to forgive and forget everything." Jesus looked at him with compassion. "You cannot forget the years of bondage, and you do not have to. The truth of your suffering must be respected. You can forgive him as a person, but you do not have to erase the truth of what he did. Your forgiveness will be all the more powerful when it acknowledges the whole truth. 19. Forgiveness is not an exchange, but a gift given without expectation of return. If we forgive on the condition that the other person must change, must compensate, or must do something for us, then it is a commercial contract, not forgiveness. True forgiveness is a free gift. It is given because the giver wants to be free and wants to reflect the generosity of God, not because of any expected benefit from the receiver. When Jesus healed the 10 lepers, only one returned to give thanks. The apostles were indignant, but Jesus said, "I healed all 10, not to receive thanks, but because my heart had mercy on them." True grace is always given freely. When you forgive, do so in the same way. Give without calculating, as the Father in heaven sends rain on the just and the unjust. 20. Every act of forgiveness is an act of co-creation with God. When we refuse to forgive, we perpetuate the chaos and brokenness that sin has caused. When we forgive, we are participating in God's work, the work of recreating, healing, and bringing order to a wounded world. We become co-workers with Him in mending the torn nets of human relationships. In a carpenter's shop in Nazareth, Jesus was joining 2 pieces of wood. He said to his childhood friend, "Look, these 2 pieces were once one, then they were separated. Now I'm joining them again." Resentment breaks people apart in the same way. Every time you forgive someone, you are not just mending a relationship, you are doing the work of my Father, bringing wholeness back to the world. 21. A forgiving heart is a clear channel for God's grace to flow through. Resentment, like mud, clogs the flow of grace. A pure heart, ready to forgive, becomes a pristine conduit, not only for receiving God's grace for oneself, but also for letting it flow through to others. We become instruments of His peace. By a well, Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." Later, He added to His disciples, "When you hold bitterness in your hearts, you are like a dry well. When you forgive, you clear the spring, and the living water of the Father can flow through you to quench the thirst of others as well." 22. Forgiveness breaks the cycle of sin and injustice passed down from one generation to the next. Hatred is hereditary. The revenge of one generation becomes the reason for the revenge of the next, creating endless cycles of violence in families and societies. A courageous act of forgiveness has the power to break that vicious chain, opening up a new and free future for the descendants. 2 clans in a village had hated each other for generations. Jesus invited the elders of both sides and told them the story of Cain and Abel. He said, "Abel's blood cried out from the ground, and since then, blood has not stopped shedding. But I have come to tell you that there is a power greater than vengeance, and that is forgiveness. Which of you will be brave enough to stop this river of blood, so that your children may live by a stream of peace?" 23. The Eucharist, or the Last Supper, is the ultimate lesson in forgiveness. In the act of breaking the bread and sharing the wine, Jesus gave Himself. "This is my body, which is given for you. This is my blood, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." He gave this gift of forgiveness even before the sin against Him was committed. It is a preemptive forgiveness, a love that does not wait for repentance, but actively seeks to redeem. In the upper room, as He took the bread, Jesus looked at His disciples, including Peter, who would deny Him, and Judas, who would betray Him. He did not say, "Be worthy, and then I will give." He said, "Take and eat." That act teaches that God's forgiveness is not based on our merits, but entirely on His self-giving love. 24. Forgiveness is practicing the economy of the kingdom of heaven, an economy based on grace, not debt. The world operates on the ledger of debt. You owe me. I will collect. Everything is calculated and settled. But the kingdom of heaven operates on a completely different logic, the logic of grace. All debts have been erased by an infinite love. When we forgive, we are living by the law of the kingdom of heaven here on earth, declaring that we belong to a kingdom of giving. Jesus told the parable of the servant who was forgiven a huge debt, but refused to forgive his fellow servant a small one. He then explained to the crowd, "You live in a world that counts pennies, but your Father in heaven counts souls. You have been forgiven a debt you could never repay. So how can you refuse to cancel the small debts your brothers owe you? Live like children who have inherited a fortune, not like debt collectors." 25. Forgiveness is an act of hope in the possibility of another's transformation. When we refuse to forgive, we slam the door on a person's future, forever nailing them to their past mistakes. When we forgive, we are expressing a belief that no one is beyond redemption, that God's grace can transform even the hardest of hearts. It is an act of hope in the resurrection of goodness in others. When Zacchaeus, a hated tax collector, climbed a tree to see Jesus, everyone mocked him. But Jesus looked up and called him by name. He did not say, "Come down and return what you have taken." He said, "Today I must stay at your house." It was this act of trust and bestowal of dignity that led to Zacchaeus' conversion. Later, Jesus said to those around him, "Sometimes, to help a person find their true self, We only need to treat them as if they were already the person they could become. 26. A forgiving community is a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Unity does not come from everyone being perfect and never offending one another. The true unity of a community is shown in its ability to heal and forgive one another when brokenness occurs. Such a community becomes a living sign to the world of a different way of life, a way of brotherhood and mercy. After the disciples argued about who was the greatest, Jesus told them, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, not because you never fall, but by the way you lift each other up after you fall. Not because you never hurt each other, but because you are always ready to wash one another's feet in a spirit of forgiveness and service." 27. Forgiveness builds bridges across the chasms of division. Division, whether in families, between nations, or in religions, is fed by the bricks of resentment and unhealed memories. Forgiveness is the material for building bridges of understanding and reconciliation, allowing people from opposite sides of the chasm to come closer to one another. Standing on a mountain from which both the land of the Jews and the Samaritans could be seen, Jesus said to his disciples, "Do you see that valley? It divides two peoples. But in my Father's kingdom, there is no valley that love cannot fill." Every time a Jew forgives a Samaritan, and vice versa, they are not just cancelling a personal debt, they are leveling a hill of hatred, opening a way for all people. 28. Nurturing resentment impoverishes the soul and shrinks our world. An unforgiving person lives in a tiny world, confined by the walls of bitterness. Every thought and emotion revolves around that hurt. Conversely, forgiveness expands our world. It frees up mental energy so that we can see beauty, feel joy, and connect with others more fully. A rich but constantly grumpy man harbored an old feud. Jesus told him a parable. There was a man who owned a large vineyard, but he spent all day staring at a dead vine in the corner, complaining about it. He missed the entire bountiful harvest. Your resentment is like that dead vine. It makes you miss all the life and joy my Father offers every day. 29. Forgiveness teaches us the profoundest lesson in humility. The act of forgiving forces us to confront a truth. We are also in need of forgiveness. It shatters the illusion of our own righteousness and places us on equal footing with the one who hurt us, as imperfect people, equally in need of God's mercy. When Peter denied Jesus 3 times and was later forgiven by Jesus on the shore, he learned the greatest lesson of his life. Jesus did not ask, "Why did you do it?" He only asked, "Do you love me?" Peter carried that lesson with him for the rest of his life. Leadership in the kingdom of heaven comes not from strength or perfection, but from a broken heart that has been healed by mercy, and from there knows how to be merciful to others. 30. The ultimate measure of faith lies not in doctrine, but in the ability to forgive. We can know the scriptures by heart, observe all the laws, and preach eloquently. But the final test of our relationship with God lies in how we treat those who are indebted to us. The ability to forgive unconditionally is the most authentic proof that we have truly understood and are living the gospel of love. In one of his final teachings, Jesus told the crowd, "On the last day, my Father will not ask you how many temples you built or how many sacrifices you offered. He will look into your hearts and ask, 'When your brother was hungry, did you feed him? When your brother hurt you, did you forgive him? For what you did to the least of these my brothers, you did to me. And what you refused to forgive them, you also refused to forgive me.'" Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 31. Forgiveness is an investment in a future you cannot foresee. When you forgive, you have no guarantee that the other person will change, that the relationship will be mended, or that justice will be served. Forgiveness is an act of pure faith. It is like sowing a good seed in dark soil, not knowing for sure if it will rain or shine tomorrow, but still trusting in the law of life and entrusting the outcome to God. A farmer named Caleb had a brother who had ruined the only common road to the market. Caleb was angry and did not want to forgive. He said to Jesus, "What's the use of forgiving? The road is still broken, and he is still a selfish person." Jesus pointed to an old man planting young olive trees. "Caleb, that old man will not enjoy the shade of these trees for many years. He may not even live to see them bear fruit. But he still plants because he believes in a future he cannot see." Your forgiveness is a seed like that. You sow it not for the immediate result, but because you believe in the harvest of peace that God has promised. 32. Forgiveness is embracing a divine weakness that is stronger than human strength. The world glorifies the strength of domination, of making others submit. But the gospel reveals a different kind of strength in self-emptying, humility, and self-sacrifice. Forgiveness is renouncing worldly strength, the right to collect debts, the right to revenge, to put on the power in weakness of God, like a grain of wheat that must die to produce many seeds. When a disciple saw that Jesus did not use his power to resist those who arrested him, he asked in confusion, "You have legions of angels. Why don't you make them kneel?" Jesus replied, "Human strength is to break, but my Father's strength is to heal. A bruised reed my Father will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. To forgive the weak, that is the expression of absolute power, the power of love that can endure all things." 33. The most powerful forgiveness is when it looks the most insane to the world. When the hurt is too great, when the offender shows no remorse, forgiving seems to go against all common logic. It is in those moments, when forgiveness cannot be explained by human reason, that it becomes the most powerful testimony to another reality, a kingdom built on grace, not merit. When Jesus healed the son of a Roman centurion who belonged to the occupying army, many Jews murmured. Someone in the crowd asked, "Why do you help our enemy?" Jesus replied, "My Father's love knows no boundaries of friend or foe. It shines and pours down like the sun and the rain. When your love is only for those who love you, it is human love. When it reaches even the most seemingly absurd places, that is when it reflects the love of God." 34. The memory of being forgiven is the most powerful motivation to forgive others. A person who has never deeply felt that they are a forgiven sinner will find it hard to be merciful to others. But once we truly grasp the enormous debt that God has cancelled for us, the small debt our brother owes us suddenly becomes insignificant. Gratitude becomes an endless fuel for forgiveness. After Jesus told the parable of the prodigal son, a listener asked, "How could the older brother forgive his younger brother who had squandered the inheritance?" Jesus looked at him and asked back, "The better question is, how could the younger son not forgive anyone after being forgiven so much by his father? My children, always remember that you were once the prodigal son who was welcomed home. Then you will find it easy to open the door for your brothers. 35. True forgiveness is slunt. It does not need to be announced. Forgiveness is not a performance to be applauded by others. It does not need loud declarations of "I forgive you." Often, the deepest forgiveness takes place in the silence of the heart, through a prayer for the one who hurt you, through an unexpected act of kindness, through refusing to participate in gossip. It is a secret between the soul and God. A woman in the village had a habit of slandering others. One day, she made up a story about a widow named Susanna. Susanna found out, but did not confront or argue. A few weeks later, when the other woman fell ill, Susanna quietly brought her a bowl of hot soup. A disciple saw this and asked Jesus. He smiled. The noise of condemnation echoes through the marketplace, but the sound of forgiveness is as gentle as soup being placed by a sickbed, and that silent sound echoes all the way to heaven. 36. Forgiveness without love is just a cold transaction. Love gives it life and warmth. You can forgive someone just to obey a commandment, to have peace of mind. But if there is not a bit of love for them, that forgiveness is still incomplete. Love is the soul of forgiveness. It turns an act of discipline into an embrace, turns a cancellation of debt into a wish for the other person's happiness. Jesus said to his disciples, "When you forgive, do not be like debt collectors. They cross a name out of a book with a cold heart. Be like a mother forgiving her erring child. She not only erases the mistake, she embraces him, weeps with him, and wishes the best for him. Let love warm your act of forgiveness." 37. Patience is the companion of forgiveness. Not all wounds heal overnight. Some forgiveness needs time to mature, like wine aging in the dark. Patience allows the healing process to happen naturally, without forcing it. It is the acceptance that the heart has its own seasons. The winter of pain, the spring of budding forgiveness. The Apostle Peter, after denying Jesus, was filled with remorse. Even though Jesus had appeared and forgiven him, he still felt unworthy. One day, Jesus asked him, "Peter, when you cast your net, do you pull it up right away, or do you wait patiently?" Peter replied, "I must wait, Lord." Jesus said, "The healing of the soul is the same. I have already forgiven you. Now, be patient with yourself. Allow my grace to slowly transform your pain into strength." 38. Wisdom is knowing how and when to express forgiveness. A direct conversation is not always necessary to forgive. Sometimes, forgiveness is shown by not bringing up old mistakes. Sometimes it is a compassionate silence. The wisdom given by the Holy Spirit will help us discern what is best for both ourselves and the other person in each specific situation. Mary of Bethany sat at Jesus' feet while her sister Martha complained. Jesus did not rebuke Martha harshly. He only said gently, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things." He later said to the disciples who were there, "Truth must be spoken in love, and sometimes love requires silence. Forgiveness is the same. Sometimes it needs to be spoken. Sometimes it needs to be lived. Pray for the wisdom to discern." 39. Forgiveness is the guardian of joy. Resentment is a thief that steals joy. It creeps into the mind, colors every experience gray, and prevents us from fully enjoying the blessings of the present. Forgiveness is the act of chasing that thief out of the house, sealing the doors and windows of the soul so that joy can stay and flourish. A little boy, whose favorite toy was taken by a friend, cried and cried. His father, a disciple of Jesus, came to ask him what to do. Jesus said, "Your son is not just crying for the lost toy. He is crying because of the injustice. But if he holds on to his anger, he will miss the whole afternoon of play with his other friends. Teach him that forgiveness is not about letting his friend win, but about freeing himself to go play again. Don't let a small loss steal a great joy." 40. Courage is not the absence of fear, but forgiving despite the fear of being hurt again. Forgiveness makes us vulnerable. It is a risk. True courage is not being reckless or naive, but recognizing that risk and still choosing love over self-protection. It is believing that living with an open heart, despite the risks, is better than living in a safe but lonely fortress. A woman who was betrayed by her husband after having forgiven him still felt afraid. She confided in Jesus, "I'm afraid he will hurt me again, teacher." Jesus did not dismiss her fear. He said, "Your fear is a loyal guard, but do not let it become your jailer." The greatest courage is not to fight without fear, but to open the door again, even when your hand is still trembling. Give your fear to the Father in heaven and act in love. Love will be your torch to guide you in the darkness of fear. 41. Forgiveness is a rebellion against the law of decay and destruction. In nature, everything tends towards chaos and decay, the principle of entropy. Sin and hatred are the same. They destroy and disintegrate relationships. Forgiveness is an act that goes against that flow. It is a creative force, a constructive act, re-establishing order and life where there was only death. Seeing an old, crumbling wall, Jesus said to his disciples, "Neglect and time have brought this wall down. Resentment brings down families and communities in the same way. But look at that builder. He is picking up the old stones to build a new wall. When you forgive, you are doing the work of God's builder. You are resisting the decay of the world and building something that will last." 42. Forgiveness brings a peace of eternity into the brokenness of time. Human time is marked by past, present, and future. Resentment imprisons us in the past. Forgiveness is an act that is eternal in nature. It is not limited by time. It can heal the past, transform the present, and open up a new future. It is a window that allows the light of the kingdom of heaven to shine into the room of time. An old man sat with Jesus, lamenting the mistakes of his youth. "If only I could go back," he said. Jesus replied, "You cannot go back to the past, but you can invite eternity into the present. My Father's forgiveness is not bound by years. When you accept it, it heals not only the man you are today, but also the young man in your memory. And when you forgive others, you are also giving them the gift of escape from the prison of time." 43. Forgiveness prepares the soul for death and the life to come. No one can enter into full communion with love, which is God Himself, if their heart is still heavy with the burdens of hatred. Forgiveness is a rehearsal for eternal life. It is the shedding of unnecessary baggage so that we can lightly step through the threshold of the life to come, where only love exists. When Lazarus died, Jesus said to Martha, "Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." He later said privately to his disciples, "Before I called Lazarus from the tomb, the burial cloths had to be removed." Before a soul can enter eternal life, it must also voluntarily remove the burial cloths of bitterness and resentment. Live each day as if you are removing one thread of that cloth. 44. Forgiveness is the language of the resurrection. The resurrection is the victory of life over death, of a new beginning over an end. Forgiveness speaks the same language. It declares that no mistake is a final stop. No relationship is completely hopeless. There is always the possibility of a new dawn after a long, dark night. When Mary Magdalene wept at the empty tomb, the risen Jesus appeared and called her name. The first thing he did was not to condemn those who had killed him or the disciples who had fled. His very appearance was a great act of forgiveness. He then said to the fearful disciples, "Peace be with you." That peace is the first fruit of the resurrection, a peace built on the foundation of absolute forgiveness. 45. Every forgiven sin is a victory over the power of darkness. There is an invisible spiritual battle in this world. The power of evil seeks to divide, to cause hatred, and to lead to despair. Every time a person chooses forgiveness over revenge, they are striking a powerful blow against the strategy of the devil. They are siding with the light and expanding the territory of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Jesus said to his disciples after they returned from a mission, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." He explained further, "He did not fall because of the great miracles you performed, but because every time you preached mercy, every time two enemies reconciled, every time a bitter heart chose to forgive. Those are the real flashes of lightning that shake the foundations of the kingdom of darkness." 46. Forgiveness is letting go of the need to understand why. One of the biggest obstacles to forgiveness is our constant attempt to find a rational explanation for the other person's wrongful act. Why did they do that? The truth is, many evil acts have no logic. Forgiveness is accepting the mystery of evil and human freedom, and giving up the need to control by understanding everything. Job, in his immense suffering, constantly asked God why. In the end, God did not answer his why question. He only revealed his greatness and love. Jesus, when teaching about the story of Job to his disciples, said, "Sometimes to heal, you don't need an answer. You need a presence. Stop asking, why did they do it? And start asking, how can I love as the Father in heaven loves?" The second question will set you free. 47. Forgiveness is an act of listening. Listening to the pain of others, not just your own. Usually when we are hurt, we only hear the voice of our own pain. Full forgiveness sometimes requires a further step, trying to listen and feel the pain, fear, or imperfection that drove the other person to act. This is not to excuse them, but to see them as a whole person who is also suffering. When Peter wanted to use his sword to defend Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was acting out of his own fear and loyalty. Jesus stopped him and healed the servant's ear. He said to Peter, "Peter, you only hear the sound of your sword. You do not hear the fear in the soldier's cry or the pain of a man who is just following orders. To bring peace, you must, first to us, learn to listen to all sides, especially those you consider your enemies." 48. Forgiveness is a spiritual breath. Inhale God's mercy and exhale forgiveness for others. The act of forgiveness can be overwhelming if we rely only on our own strength. Imagine it as a breath. When we inhale, we are conscious of receiving grace, forgiveness, and God's unconditional love. When we exhale, we release that forgiveness to those around us, while also letting go of bitterness. Inhale grace. Exhale mercy. A group of disciples felt exhausted by the conflicts in their community. Jesus led them to a quiet place and said, You are tired because you are trying to exhale without inhaling. You are trying to forgive with empty lungs. Now sit still, take a deep breath, and know that it is the Father's love filling you. Then as you exhale, let the resentment flow out with your breath. Do this, and you will never run dry, for you are breathing with the very breath of God. 49. The inability to forgive often points to a deeper, unhealed wound within us. Sometimes our anger towards a specific offense is disproportionate to its severity. This is often a sign that the incident has touched on an old wound, an unresolved pain from the past. The inability to forgive others becomes an invitation to turn inward and ask God to heal the abandoned lands in our own souls. A man could not forgive his son for a small mistake. He came to Jesus for advice. Jesus asked him, "When your son spilled the water jug, did it remind you of a greater loss in your past?" The man burst into tears, realizing his anger stemmed from the pain of being abandoned by his own father as a child. Jesus said, "Let me first heal the wound of the child within you. When you are healed, you will find it easy to forgive your son." 50. Ultimately, forgiveness is a mystery that can only be understood by a heart that has been broken and mended by love. Reason can analyze forgiveness, but it cannot fully grasp its essence. Forgiveness is not a formula, but an experience. It is only truly understood by those who have faced their own brokenness, realized their own powerlessness, and then felt the embrace of a love greater than themselves, a love that does not condemn, but only lifts up and heals. It is in the experience of being loved when we are most unworthy that we find the strength to do the same for others. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared to the disciples hiding in a locked room. He showed them his wounds. Those wounds were not symbols of failure, but proof of a love that went to the very end. He said, "As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven." He did not send them from a position of perfection, but from the position of those who had witnessed and touched healed wounds. For only those who know the price of brokenness can truly understand the value of forgiveness. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 51. Forgiveness is a muscle of the soul. It grows stronger with practice, starting with small offenses. No one can lift a large boulder without first practicing with small pebbles. Similarly, we cannot expect to have the strength to forgive a terrible betrayal if we have not practiced forgiveness in our daily interactions. Forgiveness needs to be trained through small things: a noisy neighbor, a grumpy shopkeeper, a thoughtless word from a friend. Each of these is an opportunity for us to lift weights for our soul. A young man named Jonathan complained to Jesus that he could not forgive the person who had cheated his family. Jesus pointed to a potter teaching his son. See, the father does not give the child a large lump of clay to make a giant pot. He gives him a small piece to shape into a cup. You are the same. Do not wait for a great trial to learn to forgive. Practice every day. When the muscle of your forgiveness is accustomed to small burdens, you will find you have the strength when a greater one comes. 52. To forgive a person, sometimes we must first forgive the image of a gold we thought allowed the pain to happen. When tragedy strikes, one of the deepest cries of the heart is, where was God? Anger at people is often accompanied by a metaphysical resentment towards God for not intervening. True healing requires us to confront that anger, to let go of the image of a divine protector who acts according to our will, and to accept a God whose ways are beyond our understanding, a God who suffers with us, not one who stands apart. A woman who lost her only child cried to Jesus, "I am not only angry at the illness, I am angry at God." Jesus did not argue. He just sat silently with her for a long time, and his tears also fell. Then he said, "You have a right to be angry. Pour out all your anger before him. My Father is big enough to take it. Only when you dare to face him in your most naked honesty can you begin to see a God who is not the author of your pain, but the one who weeps with you in it." 53. The act of praying for the person who offended you is the first warm drop of water that melts the ice in your heart. When the heart has turned to stone with resentment, the decision to forgive seems impossible. But there is one small act that can start it all. Praying for that person. It doesn't have to be a flowery prayer. Just a simple sentence. "Lord, have mercy on them." This act shifts our focus from our own pain to the other person's needs, and it opens a small crack in the ice for the light of grace to enter. The Apostle Thomas said to Jesus, "I cannot possibly bless the one who has harmed me, teacher." Jesus replied, "Then do not start with blessing. Start by handing them over to the Father. When you fish, you don't jump into the water to catch the fish. You just cast the line. Prayer is the same. You just need to cast their name towards my Father. The rest my Father will take care of. Gradually, you will find that your own heart is also being pulled towards the shore of peace. 54. Forgiveness includes grieving for a future that was lost or changed by the wrongdoing. When someone betrays us, we don't just lose a friend or a partner. We lose the entire future we had envisioned with them. Forgiveness is not pretending that loss is insignificant. It includes a process of mourning, of allowing ourselves to be sad for the broken dreams, the unfulfilled plans. Acknowledging this loss is a crucial part of healing. A young woman whose engagement was broken told Jesus, "Everyone tells me to forgive and move on. But I didn't just lose him. I lost the home, the children who were never born, a whole life I had imagined." Jesus nodded. "You are right. You have lost a world. Do not rush to build a new world on the ashes. Sit down, weep for what is lost. Mourn your dream. Only when you have fully said goodbye to the past will you have enough space in your heart to welcome the new future the Father has for you." 55. Forgiveness is not a one-time declaration, but a vow renewed daily. For deep wounds, forgiveness is more like a marriage vow than a contract signed once. There will be days when the memory and the pain return. On those days, we have not failed. We just need to gently renew our choice. Today, by God's grace, I choose to forgive again. This persistence is the proof of a sincere forgiveness. A disciple confided, "Teacher, I thought I had forgiven, but today the anger rose up again." Jesus pointed to the rising sun and said, "Does the sun rise once and for all? No, it rises every morning, renewing its light upon the world. Your forgiveness for great hurts needs to be the same. Every morning, renew your choice. Not because yesterday's forgiveness was worthless, but because your love is great enough to win again today." 56. Forgiveness cleanses the lens through which we see the world, revealing beauty where we once saw only bitterness. Resentment is like a layer of dirt clouding the lens of the soul. It makes everything look grey, making us unable to see the beauty, goodness, and blessings around us. When we forgive, we are performing an act of spiritual cleaning. The lens becomes clear, and suddenly, the colors of life become vibrant again. A weaver named Deborah, after being sabotaged by a competitor, could no longer weave beautiful fabrics. She told Jesus, "I no longer see color, teacher. Every thread in my hands feels lifeless." Jesus said, "That is because you are looking at them through a veil of bitterness. You cannot weave beauty when your heart is full of resentment. Forgive the other person, not for their sake, but for the sake of your fabrics. Forgive so that your eyes can once again see the green of hope and the red of love." 57. A forgiving heart is a creative heart. Resentment blocks the flow of inspiration. Creativity requires an open heart, a free and joyful spirit. Resentment, on the contrary, makes the soul withdrawn, rigid, and negative. It takes up all the mental space that should be for new ideas, for passion and imagination. Freeing oneself from the burden of hatred is also freeing the creative spring within. A musician could no longer compose after being heavily criticized by his teacher. Jesus told him, "That criticism is like a stone blocking the mouth of the cave from which the stream of your music flows. You keep standing there and cursing the stone. But you have another choice. You can forgive, not to accept the criticism as true, but to roll the stone away yourself. When the mouth of the cave is open, you will hear the music of your soul again." 58. Forgiveness has a physical dimension. It can free the body from the stress and illness of resentment. The mind and body are one. The bitterness and stress of harboring hatred can manifest as physical ailments, insomnia, headaches, digestive problems. Forgiveness is not just a medicine for the soul, it is also a remedy for the body, allowing it to rest and heal itself. Jesus met a man with chronic back pain that no doctor could cure. After talking with him, Jesus realized the man had held a grudge against his brother for 20 years. He said, "The burden you are carrying on your back is not in your bones, but in your heart. Every day you carry your anger with you. Go and reconcile with your brother. Put that burden down, and you will find your back will straighten up too." 59. When you forgive, you are rewriting the ending of your own story, refusing to let the offender be the final author. Not forgiving is allowing another person's actions to dictate the story of your life. That pain becomes the final chapter, and they become the one who wrote the ending. Forgiveness is taking back the pen. You don't erase the chapters that have been written, but you write a new final chapter yourself, a chapter about strength, freedom, and grace. A woman named Lydia, with a past of abuse, felt her life was ruined. She told Jesus, "My story ended in shame." Jesus took a half-written scroll. "Lydia, the first part of this scroll was written by someone else. But look, the rest is still blank. Will you let your story end there, or will you use your own healed hand to continue writing a story of resurrection? By forgiving, you declare that you, with God's grace, are the author of your life." 60. Forgiveness creates a sacred space around you, a zone of peace that can affect others without a word. A person who carries resentment radiates a heavy, tense energy. Conversely, a person whose heart is at peace through forgiveness carries a light, safe atmosphere. That inner peace is contagious, making those around them feel at ease and supported, even if they don't know why. The disciples asked Jesus, how to bring peace to the homes they visited. He replied, "Before you say peace to this house, make sure you have peace in the house of your own heart. You cannot give what you do not have. Settle all resentment with your brothers first. When you enter a room with a forgiven and forgiving heart, peace will go before you like a pathfinder." 61. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace. Waiting for others to deserve forgiveness is a hopeless wait and gives them control over your happiness. Forgiveness is the highest form of self-care. It is a declaration, my pain is real, but my peace is more important. I refuse to let your actions continue to occupy space in my mind and heart. A soldier asked Jesus, "How can I forgive the enemy who killed my friend? He doesn't deserve it." Jesus said, "You are right. Perhaps he doesn't. But does your friend deserve to be remembered in a peaceful heart? Do you deserve to live a life not chained by hatred? Forgive, not as a gift to him, but as a gift to yourself and to the memory of your departed friend." 62. Forgiveness is not betraying your pain. It is respecting your pain enough not to let it define you forever. Some people fear that if they forgive, they are downplaying or denying the seriousness of what happened. But the opposite is true. It is precisely because the pain is real and deep that we cannot let it become the master of our entire lives. Forgiveness is the act of honoring the pain by putting it in its proper place, in the past, and refusing to give it power over the present and future. If I forgive, am I not saying that what they did was acceptable? Someone asked Jesus. He replied, "No. When you pull a poisoned arrow out of a wound, are you saying the arrow is good? You do it because you want to live. Forgiveness is pulling the arrow of bitterness out of your soul. You do it not to justify the archer, but to save your own life." 63. The inability to forgive is a sign that we have turned the offense into an idol. Whatever we ruminate on, offer emotional energy to, and allow to take center stage in our spiritual lives, has become an idol. For many, resentment and the victim role become such an idol. It gives them an identity, a reason to live. To give it up requires an act of faith, placing God back at the center. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "You condemn those who worship golden idols, but there are more subtle idols erected in the heart. When you nurture a feud for years, you have built an altar to that injustice right in your soul. You worship it every day with bitter thoughts. Tear down that altar so that my Father can build a temple of peace there." 64. Forgiveness is an act of absolute trust in God's justice, that He will right all wrongs in His own time and way. We want to take revenge ourselves because we don't believe justice will be served. Forgiveness is an act of letting go, of handing over judgment to a supreme and perfectly just judge. It frees us from the burden of having to be the scales of justice ourselves, a burden too heavy for humans to bear. When the disciples worried about injustice and the wicked who seemed to prosper, Jesus said, "Do not fret because of evildoers. Look at the farmer. He sows his seed and trusts that my Father's sun and rain will make it grow. You sow seeds of kindness and forgiveness, and trust that my Father, who sees all things, will bring a righteous harvest in His time." 65. Forgiving the unrepentant is the purest form of grace, reflecting God's love for a sinful world. Forgiving someone who is sorry and apologizes is hard enough, but to forgive someone who continues to do wrong, who does not recognize their fault, is an act that imitates the very nature of God's grace. The Father in heaven makes His sun rise on the good and the evil. His love does not depend on our worthiness. A person asked Jesus, "But if I forgive, what if they continue to harm others?" Jesus replied, "Forgiveness is a matter of your heart with God. It sets you free. Preventing injustice is a matter of wise action and community. You can forgive the wolf in your heart, but you still need to build a fence to protect the sheep. Do not confuse inner peace with outer indifference." 66. Forgiveness is the circulatory system of the body of Christ, allowing the body to heal its wounds and function. In the community of faith, members are likened to parts of the same body. There will surely be times when the parts injure each other. Without forgiveness, those wounds will become infected, causing pain and paralyzing the whole body. Forgiveness is like the blood that carries oxygen and nutrients to heal the wound, keeping the entire body healthy. The Apostle Paul would later write down this idea. But Jesus planted the seed when he said, "If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off." He explained it more clearly to his disciples. Of course, I am not talking about self-harm, but if a relationship in the community has become toxic because of unforgiveness, it is causing gangrene in the whole body. You must cut off that resentment. You must heal it with forgiveness, or the whole community will sicken. 67. Every act of forgiveness is a rehearsal for the final banquet in the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is described as a great wedding feast, where all are invited to full communion with God and with each other. There will be no room for division or resentment at that table. Every time we forgive our brother here on earth, we are rehearsing for that banquet. We are learning the language and etiquette of our true homeland. Jesus told the parable of the wedding banquet. Then he said, "Many were invited but refused because they were busy with their fields, their oxen. There are also those who refuse the invitation to the kingdom of heaven because they are too preoccupied with the debts others owe them. They cannot attend the feast because they do not want to sit at the same table as their enemies." Practice sitting at the same table now. The table of the Eucharist and the dinner table in your homes, let them be the rehearsal places for the banquet of the kingdom of heaven. 68. Forgiveness is the only way to break the logic of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a logic that only leaves everyone blind. The law of retaliation seems fair, but it is an endless downward spiral. Violence responds to violence, hurt responds to hurt, and in the end, no one sees anything but the darkness of hatred. Forgiveness is a revolutionary act, a radical break in that loop. It introduces a new logic into the world, the logic of grace. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." He was not promoting passivity, but offering a spiritual strategy to disarm the enemy. An unexpected act of forgiveness can confuse and make the attacker question themselves, something retaliation can never do. 69. To withhold forgiveness is to set yourself up as the gatekeeper of a heaven. You also need to enter by grace. When we refuse to forgive someone, we are acting as if we have the right to decide who is and who is not worthy of mercy. We forget that we ourselves are standing at that same gate, completely dependent on God's mercy to get in. Opening our hearts to others is the condition for our hearts to be wide enough to receive grace for ourselves. Peter asked, "Lord, how are we to keep the keys of the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus replied, "The keys I give you are not to lock others out, but to open the way for them to enter." And the miracle is, every time you use the key of forgiveness to open the door for a brother, that door also opens wider for you. 70. The story of salvation, from Genesis to Revelation, is the story of God's tireless journey of forgiving humanity 70 times 7. In the end, all these philosophies come down to one central truth. Jesus' teaching is not a distant moral demand, but a summary of the very nature and action of God throughout history. From forgiving Adam and Eve and giving them garments of skin, to making a covenant with a constantly rebellious people, to sending his only Son to die for the sins of the world, and finally to the promise of a new heaven and a new earth where every tear will be wiped away. It is all one great epic of forgiveness. When the Apostle John, in his old age, was writing the book of Revelation on the island of Patmos, he had a vision of the Lamb looking as if it had been slain. He understood. Jesus in heaven still bears his wounds, not as a reminder of human sin, but as an eternal testimony to a love that has forgiven and conquered all. The teaching of 70 times 7 is not a number. It is the very name of God. 71. Forgiveness is not about erasing anger, but about refusing to let anger have the final say. Many people mistakenly believe that forgiveness means feeling completely calm and no longer having any anger. This is unrealistic. Anger is a natural reaction to injustice. Forgiveness is not about suppressing that emotion, but an act of the will, a decision that anger will not be the master. You can say, "I am still angry, but I will not let this anger control my actions. I choose love as my guide." In a storm on the lake, the disciples were terrified while Jesus was asleep. After he calmed the storm, he did not scold them for being afraid. He only asked, "Where is your faith?" He later explained to them, "Anger at injustice is like this storm. It is natural for it to arise. I do not ask you not to have storms in your hearts. I only invite you to have faith that I, my peace, am present in the midst of the storm, and I have the power to command it to be still when the time comes." 72. The act of forgiveness, paradoxically, can make you feel lonelier before it brings peace. When you are hurt, there is often a community of people who share your indignation. When you decide to forgive, you may step out of that warm but negative circle. Those around you may not understand, thinking you are weak or a traitor. For a time, you may feel alone on the path you have chosen, a path with only you and God. A woman named Abigail forgave a relative who had deceived her, but her whole family shunned her. She came to Jesus in tears. "Teacher, when I was hateful, I had everyone by my side. Now that I have forgiven, I am all alone." Jesus looked at her with deep compassion. "Abigail, you have left the noisy crowd at the foot of the mountain to climb to a quiet place to meet the Father. The loneliness you feel is the necessary silence to hear the voice of love. You are not alone. You are in the most intimate company. Stay there. Peace will come as a traveling companion." 73. Forgiveness is learning to sit with the discomfort of an unresolved situation. We often expect that when we forgive, everything will immediately return to normal. But that is not always the case. The relationship may remain broken. The other person may not change. Forgiveness is accepting that reality without letting it disturb your inner peace. It is the ability to live with unhappy endings, with unfinished stories, and to entrust it all to God's providence. A father had a son who left home and never returned. He told Jesus, "I have forgiven him, but I still ache every day." Nothing has changed. Jesus pointed to an old olive tree. "This tree has stood here through many cold winters, many storms. It cannot change the weather, but it still stands firm. its roots deep in the earth. Your forgiveness cannot change your son's choice, but it can help you to stand firm in peace, rooted deep in the love of my Father, despite the storm outside. 74. True forgiveness leads to a holy indifference, not carelessness, but a peaceful detachment from the outcome. Before we forgive, we are tied to the other person. We want them to apologize. We want them to be punished. We want them to change. True forgiveness cuts that cord. We still love and pray for them, but our happiness and peace no longer depend on their actions. It is a sublime freedom, an unshakable peace. Mary Magdalene, after being forgiven by Jesus, followed him. Many still looked at her with judgmental eyes. A disciple asked if she was sad. She replied with a smile that Jesus had taught her. Before, their looks were my prison. Now I see them through the eyes of the teacher. I pray for them to see what he sees. But whether they see it or not, it no longer defines who I am. I am free. 75. Forgiveness is the act of recalibrating the inner compass, from pointing towards justice for me to mercy for all. Our natural compass always points towards me, my rights, my hurt, my need for validation. Forgiveness is a conscious act of taking that compass needle and turning it 180 degrees. It no longer points to the self, but to a greater direction, the mercy that God has for everyone, including ourselves and the one who offended us. When the disciples argued about who would sit at Jesus' right and left hand in his kingdom, they were using a compass that pointed to themselves. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." He was teaching them to recalibrate their compass. Forgiveness is the same. As long as you demand justice for me, you are still a slave. When you pray for mercy for us, you begin to act like a free child of the kingdom. 76. Forgiveness is giving the past permission to truly be the past. When we don't forgive, we drag the past into the present every day. It's not a memory, it's an ongoing event. Forgiveness is a decisive act, setting a milestone and saying, "That story belongs to yesterday. Today is a new day." It doesn't erase the past, but it strips the past of its power to poison the present. Jesus met a widow who continued to wear mourning clothes, even though her husband had been dead for many years. She was not just crying out of grief, but also out of resentment towards those she blamed for her husband's death. Jesus said, "You are letting yesterday take up all of your today and tomorrow. Mourn the dead, but do not mourn your whole life. By forgiving, you allow the past to rest in peace so that the present can be lived." 77. Forgiveness redeems time, turning wasted years in bitterness into the foundation for future wisdom. Looking back on years spent in hatred, we may feel regret and a sense of waste. But through the lens of grace, nothing is wasted. That very experience of bitterness, once healed by forgiveness, gives us a profound empathy and wisdom we could not have gained otherwise. The wound becomes a source of understanding. An elderly man confessed to Jesus, "I wasted half my life hating someone. Now I've forgiven, but I regret those years so much." Jesus replied, "A potter doesn't throw away a piece of clay that was fired incorrectly. He grinds it up, mixes it with water and new clay, and it becomes part of an even more beautiful pot. Those years are not lost. My Father will use your very understanding of darkness to make you a brighter lamp for others." 78. Holding on to resentment is an attempt to control the past, an attempt that always fails. Forgiveness is letting go of that control. We constantly replay the event in our minds, thinking I should have, or they should have. It's a hopeless attempt to change an unchangeable past. Forgiveness is accepting our powerlessness over the past. It's the act of letting go, of stopping the attempt to be a time-controlling God and entrusting everything to the true God. Jesus said to someone obsessed with a past mistake, "You are like someone trying to row a boat against a waterfall. You exhaust yourself, but the boat is still carried away. Let go of the oars. Let the river of my Father's grace carry you to a new shore. You cannot change what is behind you, but you can decide your direction from today." 79. Sometimes we must forgive ourselves for who we were when we were hurt, for not being stronger, wiser, or for our own reactions. Besides being angry at others, we are often angry at ourselves. Why did I trust them? Why was I so weak? This self-blame is a second prison. Complete forgiveness includes showing compassion to the younger, more vulnerable version of ourselves in the past, acknowledging that we did the best we could with what we had at the time. A woman felt guilty for not being able to protect her child from an accident. She could not forgive herself. Jesus told her, "When you look back, you bring today's wisdom. But on that day, you only had that day's light. Treat the person you were in the past as you would treat a frightened child. Embrace her, comfort her, and forgive her. You cannot heal others if you are still at war with yourself." 80. An unforgiving person becomes an energy black hole in the community. A forgiving person becomes a source of life. A bitter person drains the energy of those around them. Their story always revolves around injustice. Their words are always tinged with negativity. Conversely, a person who has gone through pain and chosen forgiveness radiates an energy of life, hope, and lightness. They become a safe haven, an inspiration for others. Jesus spoke of 2 trees in a garden. One tree holds on to all of last season's dead leaves. It becomes heavy, its branches cannot reach up, and there is no room for new buds. The other tree let the wind carry away the old leaves. When spring came, it budded and blossomed, and birds came to build their nests. Which tree do you want to be in my Father's garden? 81. Public forgiveness, when done humbly, has the power to heal not just individuals, but an entire community. When a community-wide injustice occurs, a public act of personal forgiveness can break the cycle of revenge and suspicion. It is not a performance, but a powerful testimony that gives others the courage to begin their own healing journey. After Zacchaeus declared he would compensate those he had cheated, Jesus did not just speak to him privately. He declared to the crowd, "Today salvation has come to this house." By publicly affirming the conversion and implicitly affirming the forgiveness, he healed not only Zacchaeus, but also the relationship between him and the community of Jericho. He taught that private forgiveness can become leaven for an entire community. 82. Teaching a child to forgive is more important than teaching them any worldly skill. We teach our children mathematics, literature, and careers. But if we do not teach them how to deal with hurt and practice forgiveness, we have left them ill-equipped for the most arduous journey, the journey of the heart. The ability to forgive is the most precious legacy one generation can pass on to the next. When the disciples tried to keep the children from coming to Jesus, he rebuked them. He took the children in his arms and said, "The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." One of the characteristics of childhood is the ability to forgive quickly. They can argue, but 5 minutes later they are playing together again. Jesus taught that this skill is not a naivety to be outgrown, but a wisdom to be preserved and nurtured throughout life. 83. Forgiveness is the antidote to the scapegoat mechanism, which binds societies together through shared hatred. Humans have a tendency to strengthen their group's solidarity by identifying a common enemy, a scapegoat on whom to blame all sins and vent anger. Forgiveness is the act that breaks this cruel mechanism. It refuses to participate in the collective stoning. It affirms the dignity of the condemned individual and forces the community to look at the darkness within itself instead of projecting it onto others. When the crowd wanted to stone the woman caught in adultery, they were united in their self-righteousness. By saying, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her," Jesus shattered the scapegoat mechanism. He forced each person to confront their own truth, and at that moment, the unity based on hatred dissolved. His forgiveness saved not only the woman, but also the crowd from their own sin. 84. The most difficult forgiveness is often within the family, because love and pain are so deeply intertwined there. We can easily dismiss a stranger, but a wound inflicted by a loved one hurts much more. This is because the expectations are higher, the bond is deeper, and betrayed love causes greater pain. Forgiveness in the family requires an extraordinary level of grace and effort, but it also brings the deepest healing. In the parable of the prodigal son, the older brother could not forgive his younger brother. His pain was not just about money, but about the father's love that he felt was being divided. Jesus told this story to show the complexity of forgiveness within a family. The father did not command. He only invited, "My son, everything I have is yours." That invitation is the path to forgiveness, realizing that God's love is infinite and is not diminished when shared. 85. Forgiveness is participating in the very breath of God. If God is love, and the nature of love is to give, then continuous forgiveness is the breath of God in a sinful world. When we forgive, we are not just doing a good deed. We are synchronizing our breath with the breath of the Creator. We breathe in His grace and breathe out mercy for the world. In the book of Genesis, it is written that God breathed into His nostrils the breath of life. Jesus, after His resurrection, breathed on the disciples and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven." The breath of God, which is His very life, is intimately connected with the power and act of forgiveness. To live in the Spirit is to live a continuous forgiveness. 86. Refusing to forgive is an attempt to play God, but in the most pathetic way possible. When we hold the power to judge and condemn a person, we are sitting on the throne of God. But it is a very pitiful throne. It is built with the bricks of bitterness, ruled by pettiness, and its kingdom is only a dark prison of resentment. To forgive is to abdicate that pitiful throne to become a free child in the vast kingdom of mercy. Jesus said to the self-righteous, "The tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you." Why? Because these people knew they had nothing to be proud of. They did not sit on any throne. They stood before God with empty hands. And in that emptiness, they had enough room to receive mercy. But those who had set themselves upon the throne of judgment had no room for grace. 87. God's silence. In the face of our mistakes is often His most profound act of forgiveness, giving us the space to return. Sometimes we sin and expect immediate punishment, but there is only silence. That silence is not indifference. It is the patience of a father who does not want to shame his child, a father who is waiting for us to realize and return in freedom. It is a forgiveness that respects our dignity. After Peter denied Jesus, Jesus did not appear and rebuke him immediately. He left him with the silence and the crowing of the rooster. It was in that painful silence that Peter truly repented. Jesus' later forgiveness on the shore could then penetrate deep into his soul. Sometimes, God forgives us by giving us the space to confront ourselves. 88. Forgiveness is the ultimate letting go, not just of the other's fault, but also of the ego's need to be right. The final barrier to forgiveness is often our ego. We want to be the one who is right, who is justified, who holds the higher moral ground. Forgiveness is an act of radical self-emptying. It accepts that healing and love are more important than proving oneself right. It places the relationship above the ego. Two disciples were arguing about who was right and who was wrong. They asked Jesus to judge. He did not say who was right or wrong. He took a basin of water and began to wash both of their feet. That action said, "In my kingdom, who is right and who is wrong is not as important as who is willing to humble themselves to serve and to heal. Let go of your need to win, and together you will find a greater victory." 89. The final stage of forgiveness is gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson the wound has taught you once it has truly healed. This may sound impossible, but it is the pinnacle of healing. When a wound has been completely transformed by grace, we can look back and realize that it was through that painful experience that we became stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. We are not grateful for the evil, but we are grateful for the good that God has brought out of that evil. The Apostle Paul, who was once a persecutor of the faith, wrote that he was given a thorn in my flesh. He pleaded with the Lord to take it away. But the Lord said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul learned to be grateful even for that thorn, because it kept him humble and dependent on God. Forgiveness is the same. The healed wound can become the most precious reminder of God's grace. 90. The command to forgive 70 times 7 is ultimately not a law to be obeyed, but a description of what a heart transformed by love will naturally do. The goal of the spiritual life is not to try our best to follow a list of rules, including the rule of forgiveness. The goal is to allow God's love to so saturate and transform us that forgiveness becomes a natural reflex, a second nature. It is no longer something we have to do, but something we cannot help but do out of a heart that has been loved. Jesus pointed to a blossoming apple tree. He said to his disciples, "Do you command this tree to blossom? Do you count how many fruits it has given? No. It blossoms and bears fruit because that is its nature, when it is rooted deep in good soil and nourished by the sun." You are the same. Do not just try to do forgiveness. Instead, root yourselves ever deeper in the love of my Father. Let His grace be the sun for your soul, and then you will see one day you forgive not because I command it, but because it is who you have become. Your heart will blossom with forgiveness on its own. So our contemplative journey through 90 philosophies on the teaching of forgiving 70 times 7 has come to an end. Together, we have traveled from the most basic concepts to the deepest and most delicate corners of the human heart. We have discovered that forgiveness is not a dry law to be obeyed, but an invitation to step into the very nature of God's love. It is not a single act. but the very breath of the soul. Just as the apple tree blossoms on its own, when rooted deep in the Mother Earth, a heart bathed in grace will also blossom with forgiveness on its own. This journey may not be easy. There will be times when we stumble, when old wounds ache again, when the ego wants to raise its voice of hatred. But please do not be discouraged. Every small step on the path of forgiveness, whether it's a kind thought for the person who hurt us, a silent prayer, or a quiet resolve to let go, all are a great victory of light over darkness. Church Audio would love to hear your story. Throughout this journey, which philosophy has touched your heart most deeply? Please share your feelings in the comments below so that we can build a community of love and support each other on this path. If you found this program meaningful, please take a moment to press the like button and share this video with your loved ones. Who knows, a message spread at the right time could become a source of comfort and healing for a soul in need. And don't forget to press the subscribe button and the bell icon to continue on meaningful journeys of faith with Church Audio in the future. On behalf of the Church Audio channel, I sincerely thank you all for listening and for your companionship. May the peace of Christ, who is the beginning and the end of all forgiveness, be with and in each of us. Farewell, and see you in the next programs.